The world knew Arthur Sterling as a ghost. He was the man who owned the skyline, a titan of industry whose signature could move markets and shift the fate of nations. But inside the penthouse of the Sterling Tower, Arthur felt like a prisoner. At 75, his doctors had given him a timeline, 6 months, maybe a year. He had no children, no siblings, and a board of directors that circled his failing health like vultures over a dying lion. Arthur stared at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling glass. He saw a man who had won the world, but lost his faith in humanity. Every hand he had shaken in the last 30 years had been reaching for his wallet. Every smile had a price tag. "Is there a single soul left?" he whispered to the empty marble room. "Who sees the man instead of the money?" It was a Tuesday when the storm of the century hit the city. The sky turned the color of a bruised plum, and the rain began to fall in heavy, relentless sheets. This was the night Arthur had chosen for his final audit. His valet, a man who had served him for decades, watched in silence as Arthur stripped away the bespoke Italian silk. In its place, he put on a faded, threadbare wool coat he'd bought at a thrift shop. He put on shoes with thinning soles and a hat that had lost its shape years ago. He left behind his watch, his phone, and his security detail. "Sir," the valet whispered, "the forecast is brutal. You could catch your death." Arthur smiled, a genuine, tired smile. "I'm already catching it, James. Tonight I just want to see if I can find a reason to live on through someone else." Arthur stepped out of the private elevator and into the service alley. By the time he reached the main thoroughfare, he was already shivering. The cold seeped into his bones immediately. To the world, he was no longer Arthur Sterling, the billionaire. He was just another old man, invisible and in the way. For 2 hours, Arthur walked. He stood on street corners as luxury cars splashed freezing gutter water onto his legs. He watched as people in expensive suits checked their watches and stepped around him as if he were a piece of discarded trash. He tried making eye contact. He coughed, leaning against a lamppost, his breath coming in ragged puffs of white. A young man in a tech firm jacket actually pushed him aside to catch a taxi. A woman clutching a designer handbag pulled it closer to her chest as she passed, as if his poverty were contagious. Arthur felt a familiar bitterness rising. This was the world he had built, fast, transactional, and heartless. He sat on a damp bench in front of a closed library, his hands shaking. He was ready to call it. He was ready to go back to his tower and leave his fortune to a foundation that would eventually be swallowed by administrative greed. The test was failing. Humanity was failing. That's when he saw her. She was coming out of the back entrance of a hospital, a nurse's aide, judging by the faded blue scrubs visible under her thin jacket. She looked exhausted, her shoulders slumped under the weight of a heavy grocery bag in one hand and a tattered backpack in the other. In her right hand, she held a small, bright yellow umbrella. It was cheap, and one of the metal ribs was bent, causing the fabric to dip awkwardly on one side. Clara was halfway to the subway entrance when she spotted the old man on the bench. She stopped. Arthur watched her through the blur of rain. He saw the hesitation. Most people hesitate because they are afraid of being bothered. Clara hesitated because she was calculating how to help. She walked over, her boots splashing in the puddles. She didn't ask if he was okay. The answer was written in his shivering frame. Instead, she simply stood beside him and adjusted her yellow umbrella so it covered him completely. "The subway is closed for maintenance 3 blocks ahead," she said softly. Her voice wasn't filled with pity. It was filled with a tired, honest kindness. "You'll freeze if you sit here. I'm walking toward the bus station. It's 10 blocks, but they have heaters in the waiting area. Will you walk with me?" Arthur stood up, his legs stiff. For the next 20 minutes, they walked. Clara held the umbrella high to accommodate his height, even though it meant the freezing rain poured onto her own shoulder and arm. She didn't complain once. She talked to fill the silence. She talked about her long shift, about the patients she cared for, and about how she was saving up to put her younger brother through trade school. She asked him about his life, calling him Sir, with a genuine respect he hadn't felt in years. Arthur realized that for these 10 blocks, he wasn't a bank account. He was a human being. Clara shared her only shelter with a stranger, knowing she would go home soaked and likely catch a cold herself. She had nothing to gain from him. When they reached the bus station, she reached into her grocery bag and pulled out a warm thermos. "I didn't drink my tea during my break," she said, pressing the warm metal into his hands. "Keep it, and take the umbrella. I live just around the corner." She lied. Arthur saw her look at the bus schedule. She had a 40-minute ride ahead of her. She handed him the yellow umbrella, smiled, and ran out into the downpour, disappearing into the gray curtain of the city. 3 months later, Clara was sitting in her small apartment, worrying about a past-due electric bill, when a man in a sharp suit knocked on her door. He invited her to the Sterling Tower. She walked into the boardroom, her heart racing. On the massive screen at the end of the room, a video began to play. It was Arthur. He looked healthy in the video, dressed in his finest suit, sitting in his library. "Clara," the video began, "you probably don't remember the old man on the bench, but I remember the yellow umbrella. I spent my life building walls and towers to protect myself from the world. But in 20 minutes, you taught me that a broken umbrella held by a kind hand is a better shelter than a billion-dollar fortress." The lawyer stepped forward. "Mr. Sterling passed away last week. He has named you the sole trustee of the Sterling estate. He didn't want a businessman to run his legacy. He wanted a protector, someone who knows what it's like to be out in the rain." The story of the umbrella billionaire became a legend, but Clara didn't move into the penthouse. She stayed in her neighborhood, using the fortune to build shelters that felt like homes and schools that focused on empathy as much as academics. She kept one item in a glass case in the lobby of the new Sterling Foundation, a small, bright yellow umbrella with a broken rib. Because the surprising truth of life is that we are all just walking each other home. And sometimes, the greatest thing you can give another person isn't a fortune. It's just a little bit of cover from the rain. Clara never forgot that rainy Tuesday. And neither did the thousands of lives she touched afterward. She realized that while wealth can build a house, only kindness can build a home. Arthur Sterling went looking for a reason to trust the world again, and he found it in a broken yellow umbrella. It reminds us that the smallest act of compassion can be the greatest legacy we ever leave behind. You never know whose life you are changing just by being the person who stays when everyone else walks away. If this story touched your heart today, please consider joining our community. By subscribing to Stories by DC, you're helping us share these lessons of hope and humanity with the world. If Clara's choice moved you, hit the like button. It tells us to keep creating stories like this one. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had a yellow umbrella moment? A time when a stranger's small act of kindness changed your entire day, or even your life? Thank you for watching, and remember, wherever you go today, be the light in someone else's storm. I'll see you in the next story.